Hello! In this tutorial, we are going to go over how you can do a subject fly-in transition. Now, before I try to explain that to you, let's just go ahead and see it in action. And pay attention to around this point of the video as I hit play. Okay, that went really fast, so I'm going to jump over here and just go frame by frame with the keyboard. And you can see what's happening here. The subject from the second scene, we basically took that subject, cut them out, and then animated them flying across the screen before we move on into the next scene. And that's pretty much what we're doing here. Now, you gotta wonder, why is this tutorial video so long if that's all we're doing? It's because, well, first I am going to go through step by step like I normally do. A lot of what we're going to cover is material that I've covered in prior tutorials, so I will try to keep the flow pretty smooth and quick. Just going through all the basics, I'm guessing would take us maybe 15 minutes, and I'm guessing this video is much longer because what we're going to see as the end result of that looks pretty good, but there's a way to try to make it look even better because this whole blurring business, you notice how it's really blurred and he's kind of stretched across for the first few frames and then slowly is less blurred until it's barely blurred. That's some extra work right there. And the rest of the tutorial will cover off how to do that part. But just doing the basic cutout and animating them across, pretty fast. So now that you know what we're gonna do, let's do it. I am going to switch over to another Blender project file that I have that has most things prepared already. So you can see in this scene I have called second selection, this is the video that we're gonna flip over to. And we're here on frame 2050, and this is exactly the frame that has the subject that we are going to cut out. And we're going to do that by creating a mask that goes around more or less his entire shape. And then we'll apply that mask so that we have just this subject. We can export it as an image, and then we can bring that image into our project and animate it to create that effect. I'm going to point out right now, we do not have to be super careful in the creation of the mask because, first of all, it's going to happen really fast. Unless someone is going to pause it and go frame by frame, they probably won't notice. And second is we're going to blur it anyway, because if we don't apply a blur, it'll look weird. You'll see what I mean once we actually go through the process. So for those two reasons combined, there isn't a very good reason to go super careful with the mask creation. So that's the good news there, because actually creating the mask, I think, takes most of the time. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to go up here to the plus sign and click here and then go down to VFX and masking. That creates our masking workspace. And masking, I have created so many videos on masking. Hopefully this is going to be fairly easy for you to follow along. If not, please do go watch those other videos because I'm not going to explain too much here. I'm just going to try to go through it pretty quickly. All right, so as a first step, I'm just going to hide these parts. I don't need them. I'll open up that same movie file, which is in my media folder. So that was the charge video. Okay, and because we didn't switch scenes or anything, we're already on the exact frame we need to be, 2050. So we'll go ahead and create our mask now. First step is to click the new button over here. And now I'm going to hold down on the control key and just click around the subject to start creating the mask. So as I said, I'm not going to worry too much about getting it perfect. And especially because I've noticed lately that sometimes like right there, I click there and then you see what happens. It joined to the wrong vertex or point. I don't know why it's doing that. But, I'm just going to right click on this one where that should be over here. I'll just bring it over there and then try to continue along. I don't know where this person's legs are. I'm just kind of faking it. Okay, and hopefully that'll be good enough. Here we go. So far so good. Again, we don't need to take too much time on this. You could. You certainly could. But because of the fact that we're going to be blurring this and it's going to be moving so fast, it really isn't that necessary. Alright, so I've got the basic mask set up. Now the next step is to go back into video editing. Alright, and now we can apply the mask. So to do that, we're going to go over to, I believe it's this one here, strip modifiers, yes. And we add a modifier. Click on mask, and then switch this over to mask. And then click over here and select the only item there, which is mask. And there it is. We have our cutout subject. The last thing to do is to export this to an image file to make it easy to work with after that. So we're still within the properties editor. We're going to go over to the output. And you know what, let me just expand this out a bit so we can see better. And I'm going to scroll down over to here, and under output I'm going to set a path for it. This is my RAM disk, and I'll just call it person. Actually just person, yeah. And that's the first thing to do. It is already set up as PNG. Oh, okay, as an image in PNG. I was probably messing around prior to this because I think normally it's by default set up as video. But anyway, if it isn't image and PNG, then make those changes now. And also, it should be RGBA. That's very important. We definitely need it as RGBA because then that means it has transparency and this will work out nicely. Okay, what else do we need to do? The last important thing is, to adjust the frame range, of course, because we want to extract just this one single image that we're then going to animate across. So I will go over here and then just change that to match the first value. So we have a single frame. That's what our settings are. Let's go ahead and export now. So I'll go to render and render animation, and it's done. So we have our image exported. Okay, it's basic assembly. So the first thing we're going to do, because we already have these strips selected, I'm going to press Ctrl-C to copy them. Okay, so now they're in our internal clipboard ready for use. Now I'm going to go over here, click this button, and create a new scene and say copy settings. That way we have the same frame rate and resolution that we were working with before. I'm going to go ahead and rename this. I'll call it basic assembly because we are basically assembling these things. And now I'm going to hit Ctrl-V to paste. Okay, there we go. We've got this second scene in our scene ready to use. Now we won't do anything else just yet here aside from going over here and changing that start to 1. Okay, because I prefer working from frame 1. And then now we're going to switch over to the other scene. So this is the first scene that we will have our project play, and then it's going to move over to what we were working on. Now if I hit the keypad 0 to jump over and just scrub across, you can see this is what we're going to take. Right? This is the first few seconds. Again, I'm going to press Ctrl-C. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to basic assembly, and we're not at frame 1 yet. Let me just say we're at frame 1, and I'll press keypad 0 to jump over there, Ctrl-V to paste. All right, so now we've got our first snippet over here, and we already have the other part, but it's all the way at frame 2050. I can hit the backspace on my keyboard to close the gap, bring it over. So now if I just scrub around, you can see there it is. So we've got our first scene and then the second one. Now we just need that image that we exported. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I already happen to be in just the right folder. This is where we exported that image. So I can go ahead and click and drag and bring it over here. Now remember, we said at the very start that this is going to be a fast transition. This is way too many frames. So let's first click over here to see strip properties so we can see how long is this. We look at the time, the duration, and end. Strip duration right here, 25 frames. Way too much. Let's bring it down to 5. So I can, as one way of doing it is clicking on that handle and then just dragging it back, and I'll just look over there until I see it showing 5. There it is. Had to hold down on the control key so it wouldn't snap. Now that we have this image as the right duration, we need to place it properly. So remember what we saw before was that it appeared just before we switched over to the other scene. So that means we need to take this whole thing, just grab it with the G key and then put it right over here. So Blender is automatically kind of letting it snap into place. I'll click to place it. So now if I scrub across a little bit, you can see that he just appears there. It doesn't actually do anything. That's not a problem. We're going to animate next. But the key thing to point out is that once we go over here to our next frame, he's positioned exactly where he needs to be. So that means when we animate, this last frame of this image that we cut out, this should be exactly the position we want. So let me scroll up here so we can see the positioning. Here, I'm going to press the letter I to set this as a keyframe. That starts our animation. Now I'll press page up to jump to this left side border. And here, what we can do is we can make use of our grab feature. And I'm going to press G here to grab within the preview and just start sliding him over. And if you're having trouble keeping it straight, you can just press the X key on your keyboard to lock it on the X axis. And let's place him right over here. So he's basically in view, but not fully. Okay, I'll click to place. And now I press the I key again over here, and we have our keyframes. Now, it's going to look like this if I scrub across. Doesn't look great. And that's because if I go frame by frame with the keyboard, just watch the positioning here. There's a little bit of a jump here, but then a very big jump from those 2 frames, and also a big jump over here, and then a small jump again. The reason it does this is because by default, Blender applies what's called a Bezier curve to the animation. So it starts off with a low velocity and then it reaches its maximum speed of change and then it starts dropping back down. That makes this look really bad because when you think about it, at the very start of it, this subject should be rushing across the screen. But the way it's set up now, it doesn't really look like that. It looks like he's building up speed and then slowing down. We want him to be fast right from the start. The way to do that is to go into the graph editor. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to go over here and click that and switch to graph editor. And I'm going to have to size it over just to give us the space. You know what? I'll also shift this over because we don't really need to see that right now. Okay. And over here, I'll press the home key so we can see what we're doing. Now, right over here, you'll see this is the Bezier curve that I was mentioning. The easiest way to make it seem like it's a pretty fast constant speed and then an eventual slowdown when the subject reaches their destination is to click on this little handle here. So I'm going to click on that with my right mouse button. So right mouse to click. See, I have it selected now. Notice that everything is kind of related to this, but what I'm going to do is just bring it up into a diagonal so that it looks like we've got a mostly straight line. Okay, just like that. And it's still going to level off a bit. It's kind of hard to see here, but if I were to drag this down and across, you can see we're still getting a little bit of deceleration happening there, but this is going to look much better, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and see that in action. So let's frame by frame now. So from here, nice big jump over here, decent jump over here, and then a slowdown. That's way better. So let's go ahead and play that now. And you know what? Before I forget, let's also go to view and then range, set frame range to strips. So we've only got, oops, is that correct? No, I didn't do that right. I should have selected everything first and then do that. Range, set frame. There we go. So if I hit the play button now, that's pretty much what I'd shown you at the beginning. The main difference though is that you can see very clearly this person as he's flying across the screen. Not very convincing. So what we can do is we can add a blur. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. It's very easy to add a blur, so why not? I'm just gonna bring this down a bit. I'll click to select just this image, and then I will go to add, effect strip, and Gaussian blur. All right, and now we should bring this out again because we need to see what we're doing, and I'll show that to the side. Now the effect strip information is here at the top. Because he's going sideways, we shouldn't need anything on the Y, so I will click in there and set that to 0. How does that look? It looks decent, I suppose, but let's try to increase it a bit to see if it looks any better. I suppose that works. Okay, so if we go across now, so blur, 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 and then of course we're fully into the next scene, and he is as clear as possible. Okay, so that more or less concludes this first part. We've gone over all the steps now on how to do this sort of transition. Let me press P so we can do one of these preview ranges. And so we can just see it over and over again. Looks pretty good. That concludes this section of the tutorial. Stick around if you want to see the more advanced stuff. Hey, welcome. So if you're still here, it's because you want to see the advanced stuff, or you just didn't click away fast enough. Anyway, so let's go ahead and do that. The way to do it that I figured out anyway, there might be a better way. If there is, and you find it, please write a comment, let me know. The way that I've figured out is using the compositor. So let's go ahead and go in there now. I'm going to click the plus, and we're going to again go to VFX, this time compositing. A lot has changed with the compositor since Blender version 4. So I'll spend a little bit more time here because it's also new to me. Now, the first thing to note is that some things remain the same, right? We've got our scene selector up here, and for what we're doing, we're not really going to need this part, so like usual, just click and drag to make that go away. But before we touch anything, we have to create a new scene because what we're going to do now is we're going to take that image that we had extracted using the mask and then exported. We're going to do some extra work on that, and then we'll bring it back into our basic assembly and use that instead of just that one image. Okay, we're going to create a series of images with a nice little trailing blur. So let's go ahead and click this button, and we can copy the settings. We can and we should, because we still want the same resolution. So we'll copy settings, and I'll rename this as blur image set. That's what we're about to create. Now, what do we need to do here? Where is everything? You know, let me bring this back down because I need to see the resolution. 1280 by 536. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a solid color, and then we're going to lay it out here so that we can see where the image is going to be as we do the animation. What I've noticed is that if you try to take an image and then you do a translate to move it around, you can't really tell where your frame is. But really the first step is to click this new button, which creates a set of nodes that we need to work with. We don't need this node anyway. You know what? We can go ahead and delete them. We'll recreate. So I'll just press X to delete. All right, so let's go ahead and start adding things. So we can, again, we have the add menu here, and I'm already here, so I'll go ahead and continue to use that. So add input image, okay, and we're gonna just drop it here. I'll switch this over to node so I can see what we're doing. That's really tiny, and I don't feel like zooming in on that. So like I said, first thing is to create a solid color. We are going to click new, and we're going to set the width and height to exactly those dimensions from before, which was, oh man, I already forgot. Let's go ahead and bring that back down so I can see 1280 by 536. So new. This is 1280 by 536, and the color, you know, for kicks, let's pretend like this is a green screen or something. Okay, and then new image. There we go, we've got it. Control Shift left click to view. How come I don't see it? Do I need to hit backdrop? There we go. There we go. So backdrop, I have to click that so we can actually see using the viewer node. You know, let's go ahead and hit the home button, so just so we can see what we're doing here. Okay, so we've got our solid green color. I can hide that again. But we don't see any edges. Oh, you know, let's also hide this. Don't need that. So what we can do is go to view and click fit. Okay, so now we can kind of see the edges there. So this is how big our 1280 by 536 frame is. Let's also adjust the scene settings. I forgot about that. So what we had said before, oh, wait a minute. That's got the preview range on. We're going to click that to get rid of it. Okay, so right now, frame 1 to start, sure. Change this to frame 5. We want to create 5 images. All right, and we can go ahead and jump that to, there we go. We're on frame 1 now. Okay, so now we are going to bring the image in. I'll press Shift A, input, image, I'll stick it right here, and then I'll bring this back over to node, and I can click the open and find the image which is sitting in my RAM disk. Okay, that's over here. There it is. Okay, we can click on this now, Control Shift left click just to see it, right? Yeah, that's the image. Okay, and now what we're gonna do, so now that we have the image, we know we need to animate it, and it's gonna fly across the screen just like we did before. Here we need to use a node for that. So I go to Add, Transform, and Translate. That's the only thing we need to do. I'll make it go over here so it automatically adds it into the little pipeline. And over here, again, we have to set up the animation, the keyframes. So let's start by jumping to the end, because we know this is exactly where it needs to end up. And we will press the I key right here, set a keyframe, okay? Because this is where the subject needs to be on the last frame. Now we're going to jump back to the first frame, and we can start adjusting this value. You can see it's by the pixel. So we know we've got like 1,000 pixels or something. So let's go ahead and type it in, -800, see where that ends up. That's all the way over there. We know from before that that's probably about where it needs to start, but let's see that. So we can see that by combining this background with this translate. And the way to do that is with an alpha over. So once again, Shift A to add. We'll go to color and go to alpha over. Again, we drop it over here so the line turns white instead of yellow. Okay, and now we'll connect the dots. Actually, let me zoom in here. This is not right. That's the foreground, so that needs to connect over there. And our green color as the background. There. Now we can see what we're doing. So as I change this value, maybe go over there, we can see exactly where he's going to be cut off. And this looks pretty good. It might change once we add the blur, but for now, if as I use the arrow keys to go frame by frame. What just happened? Oh, I forgot to actually set the keyframe. I was silly. Okay, we're at frame 1. Let's do that again. I think we said minus 800 something. Let's just leave it at that. I'll press the I key here. There we go. We've got that set. So yeah, I could have pressed it here or here. It's literally the same thing. Okay, so now if we just use the arrow keys, it should look decent. It still has the same kind of Bezier curve interpolation. So again, we're going to need to get to a graph editor. So I'll replace this thing with graph editor and do the same thing. I'll hit the home key so we can see what we're doing. Right click on this thing and drag it like that. There we go. And that should be it. Let's drag that back. And if we use the arrow keys again, there we go. Nice big jump. Let me zoom that out so it's easier to see. Nice big jump, smaller jump, and then smaller jump. Okay, we are good. Now the final thing to do is what we actually came here to do, which was to add a nice blur that kind of does some sort of streaking motion. So let's go ahead and just get him right in the middle here so that we can see better what we're doing. And the way to do this is we are going to add something called a directional blur. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that. So Shift A, it's under Filter, Blur, Directional Blur. All right, so we're going to take that again, drag it over here so it automatically reconnects everything. And what values do we want? Well, let's bring this down a bit so we can see this subject and just start playing with the values. So the actual blur is based off of the amount field over here. So let's just drag and see what we get. Okay, that's pretty neat. That goes a little bit extreme. Well, maybe we do something like this. So maybe 1.4, except you see it as a bunch of separate images, which doesn't look good at all. To fix that, we can go over here to samples and just increase the number. So I believe a value of 4 or 5 looks decent. 5, I think, looks good. But maybe 4. Okay, let's go with 4. All right, and now let's jump back to the beginning again to see what it looks like at the start. Okay, that's pretty good. It's still visible. If after applying the blur, the subject is no longer visible, then we'd have to go over here and adjust the translate and then remember to set the keyframe. But this is looking pretty good in terms of what we're seeing here. Now, I didn't mention any of these other things. Direction is which way the blur happens. So by default, it blurs to the left. If you needed it to blur to the right, you can, I think, set the direction to the 180 degrees to make it go, yeah, so the other way. Or you can use a negative value for amount. But this is exactly what I need to set, so I'll keep it at that. Now, the last thing to make this look really nice is to animate the blur itself. We can do that because we can set a keyframe here. So let's jump to the first frame this time, and we'll set the keyframe here as the 0.14, as that is the nice strong blur. And what we'll do is when we jump to the end, this is where we can set it to 0, and then it'll animate over those 5 frames. But actually, instead of doing that, let's move 1 frame over. So this is now, we're at frame 6. We are beyond the 5 frames that we're about to render out. But let's do it here. Let's set it to 0 at this point, which will mean then that it's going to, over the 5 frames, it'll slowly reduce the blur value, but it won't go down to 0. It will still be a little bit blurred even at the final frame. Okay, so I'm going to set that to 0 while we're at frame 6. Hit the I key, and let's jump back to the beginning. And now we'll go frame by frame. here. So you can see it's got a nice blurring effect there. And then slowly it's taking shape until finally we're at frame 5. Still a little bit blurred. And this is probably going to work out nicely. All right. So we are done with setting it up. Now we just need to export it properly. So let's bring this back down so we can see the properties editor. And let's give ourselves a lot of space here. So we've got the format, of course, set up properly because we copied the other one. Let's go down over here and under the output. So it was the person. Let's rename this to blur set. Let's call it blur set. Okay. And everything else, because we made a copy of the other scene, which we had used for generating the image, we already have it set up properly as an image, specifically PNG with RGBA as the color type. Everything should be good. Let's go ahead and render. Up here, render animation. My bad, I forgot about that. It's so easy to forget about that as a person like me, because I see, like, visually I look like everything looks good, but I forgot, like, right at the beginning when we created and established these nodes, I had deleted everything, including the final output node, which we need to bring back. Okay, so let's go ahead and add output, and we'll do group output. That was the original thing. Of course, the thing is, you got to think about which node is going to have that final output. We don't actually want the green. This green was just for us to visualize where the frame borders are. So what we really want to do is use this node. The results of this node is going to be our output. So we're going to click and drag over to here. Now we've got our image established. Now we should be good to render out. So let's do that. Render animation. Yeah. And it's done. Great. Now let's go back to our video sequencing editor, the video editing workspace, and we'll go over here, and we could replace these. You know what? Just to be a stickler, but I'm going to create a full copy of this. All right, and this, I'm going to call this enhanced, okay? Because that's what we've got. We've got an enhanced set. All right, so we're going to select these two strips. We don't need or want them. X to delete. Now we're going to bring in the images that we just created. So that's blur set 1 to 5. Add image strip. And we're going to set it right here. So Blender is letting us, okay, yeah, it's locking into position there. Okay, looks good. Let's just use the arrow keys to scrub through. Nice. So if we hit the play, well, we've got the preview range set up. That's what it looks like. Which is more or less what I showed you at the start of the video. So that concludes the tutorial. So that's it. That's how you can create one of these subject fly-in transitions. You know, easy mode and then more complicated mode. Hopefully you liked one or both of them. If you did like this video, please do hit the like button on that and consider subscribing so you can see more content when it comes. And that notification bell too, because I churn out a video whenever. My release schedule, I don't have a release schedule. So hitting that notification bell will help you to see new videos when I do eventually publish new videos. Okay, great. Thank you. Bye now.